Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him.
One day, I won't find it difficult anymore to say the podcast where we rate and review. Where we rate and review. It's so hard.
Rate and review, yeah.
Every time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 69,
Nice.
Ardashir II.
I am excited for multiple reasons. First of all, I am so impressed that we have made it this long, honestly. Good on us.
Woo!
And also, the last episode was a two-parter. It was so intense, and now I'm like, well, does everything immediately go to shit? Or
Well,
What
are your expectations? Do you think everything is going to blow up in our faces, or do you think it's going to be mostly fine?
Well, I think the succession...
Or do you think it's going to be great? Could be great.
I think the succession was a little bit messy, right?
Yeah, this king is meant to be a caretaker king for Shapur's son.
Yeah. Not the succession itself, because Shapur II did, just pass away in his old age. That was fine. He wasn't murdered or anything. But his son is not ready. There's this other person, he's like, yeah, you can reign, expecting then for his son to, take over, and I don't know if that's gonna happen. But apart from, the very, in the royal palace kind of, politics, regarding, the empire as a whole, I don't know, maybe it will be fine? Because Shapur II had, secured the borders pretty nicely. And also brought the empire to a very stable point. So I'm hopeful that not everything is going to immediately go to shit. But of course, that could always happen, because it's happened before, so...
Yes, it has happened and will happen again. But, we'll see if this is another case where it will happen. So, okay, let's quickly recap Shapur II, and then we'll jump on to Ardashir, who will find out what his deal is. So, Shapur, as we remember, was crowned in utero.
Yep.
Had a few years of growing up and becoming an adult, which was good. He absolutely annihilated the Arabs, which is intense. He conquered the Kushan Empire. That was intense. He fought the Huns and got sort of an uneasy peace with them after winning an original victory. And then he fought the Romans for several decades, in the end winning the war and reversing the humiliation of the treaty that we had with Narseh, and, as I mentioned, guaranteeing that there wouldn't be a war of this scale for 150 years with Rome. So that's pretty good, and Ctesiphon would be untouched by foreign arms for another 250 years. At the same time, Armenia and Iberia were sort of divided between a Roman and an Iranian king. So they were sort of split apart. Nobody has full control, but the Iranian sides are generally much larger than the Roman side, so still doing pretty well. And otherwise, the empire is flourishing. We're doing well. The economy is going well. The fields are being expanded. Irrigation canals are being worked on. So everything seems to be going quite well.
My flowers are blooming. My crops are...
Yes. My crops are flourishing.
Yeah,
yes.
Just everything great.
The only downside is that we are now persecuting Christians because we believe them to be agents of the Roman Empire.
That is Constantine's
the Roman Empire's
fault,
Christian now.
actually. If he hadn't said anything, it would have been fine.
Yeah, but
So it's the Romans'
This
fault.
is the world we live in now. Yes, the Romans' fault. We hold no responsibility.
Well, I didn't say we hold no responsibility. But I'm saying things would be better if Constantine hadn't, done that stupid move.
Yeah, previous king didn't care about the Christians. They just cared about the Manichaeans. Christians now are the enemy because of Rome.
Yep.
So let's see how it goes. Let's see what Ardashir does and how he will deal with the world he is given.
The world he is given. A planet.
So we're not sure when Ardashir was born or who exactly were his parents, but we have some options and we get to choose because, nobody really knows, so
We
might
don't
as
know.
well choose one.
Yeah.
Most Sassanid tradition claims that he was a younger brother of Shapur II. But more modern scholars disagree because, well, Shapur II was, manifestly born very late in the time that it is possible to be born with the same father. So, how did he have a younger brother? Like, was he a half-brother and Shapur's stepmother was pregnant at the same time as his own mother, so just happened to be the case? Or is it just unlikely, and is it actually that Ardashir is a son of Shapur II? Because as we saw last time, Shapur ruled for 70 years, and it would be weird that he had no adult sons and just a son that needed a regent for a while, and Ardashir was his brother.
True.
So that was a bit unusual, that's a bit strange. So an option is that Ardashir was Shapur's adult son, but Shapur preferred his younger son, Shapur III, for his heir. So he just said, hey, you take care of your little brother for a few years, then when he's old enough, step down and give him the throne. Which would imply that Shapur II really trusted his eldest son not to go mad with power as soon as he took it. Because telling somebody to get almost absolute power and then give it up later is really trusting them a lot.
Yeah. Which we discussed a little bit on our previous episode, but also, so it was either this is going to backfire tremendously, or Shapur really had reasons to trust this man because, he's been reasonable so far, and he's like reigned for a really long time and done a really great job with the empire. I assume, presumably because he is quite intelligent and can judge people's character, right? Because you don't get to that point with the combination of hard and soft skills.
Yeah.
So, to me, it felt like a rash and unwise decision, but also I don't know the people that he was counting on at the time.
Yeah, we don't really know if he was right to or if they were just hiding their true nature. And a third option for who Ardashir is that he is a nephew of Shapur II. Because we're told that Shapur II had an older brother, also called Shapur, and so maybe Ardashir is the son of this other Shapur, making him the nephew of Shapur II, and so he is a member of the Sassanid dynasty, and he is being trusted with this regency for a while, and then he'll step down because, well, he's not officially in the line of succession, he is a bit to the side, so doesn't really count.
A bit to the side.
So what's your favorite option? Do you think he is an older son of Shapur that is told to step down? Do you think he is actually just a younger brother by a few months? Or do you think that he is a nephew? What is your preference?
I don't really have a preference.
If you were Shapur II, what would you prefer to be your caretaker king?
Probably somebody I've worked with already to run the empire, right? Like somebody who's been my right-hand man this far.
Okay, so more of a son, I guess?
Well, but like then why not make this son the heir?
Yeah, that's a fair question.
Yeah. And I wouldn't expect him to be okay with, me being like, no, but the throne is going to go to this other person. So that seems ridiculous. Maybe a nephew. Because it is close enough to that, but also not in the line of succession, right?
Yeah. So it's reasonable that he wouldn't expect to be king, but that
he
might, is still willing to help. He is close. Yeah. He's still family. He's close enough.
Yeah, and me, like, me, Serial, now, I'm like, yeah, he might, like, when you give this power to anybody, they might just be like, well, I have the power now anyway. Might as well keep it. But, yeah. Like, I don't think it's going to go without a struggle.
Okay, well, let's see.
But,
So, we've decided Ardashir is a nephew of Shapur II. Well, this nephew apparently appeared as a prince during his war against the Roman Emperor Julian. So we don't really have enough details, but Ardashir was involved enough in fighting off the Romans that he commissioned a monument of himself triumphing over the slain Julian, which is going to be his face of faces, so we'll see that. And based on the inscriptions, it looks like Ardashir was king of the vassal kingdom of Adiabene, in the west of the empire, which means that he would have some ruling experience when he was a prince, and that he also has some military experience because he probably helped out in repelling the invasion of Julian. So he seems to have some skills that indicate him as a reliable caretaker for the empire while Shapur III comes of age. But yeah, as we saw, he comes to the throne in 379 when Shapur II dies, and he is named the heir to the throne. I mean, he is named King of Kings, but with the caveat that he will have to step down when the time comes. We're told that when he ascended the throne, he gathered up the great nobles, he praised Shapur, and claimed that he would do all he could to follow in his footsteps. So, promising start. Let's see how that goes. One of the things he does first at the beginning of his reign is constructing this monument of himself triumphing over Julian. But the more interesting part are the people next to Ardashir. Because in this monument, he is flanked on the one side by the king Shapur II, who gives him the ring, the far, the divine right to rule.
Yeah.
And on the other side, there is the Yazata Mithra watching over the scene. Now, an interesting thing about Mithra is that he is the god of contracts. So you could interpret this portrayal as either Mithra overseeing the transfer of kingship and sort of like guaranteeing this transfer of property from one king to the next, or it could have the larger implication of sort of watching over Ardashir and making sure that he keeps his promise to give the throne to Shapur III. So it might be Ardashir making this big monument saying, no, don't worry, I remember the contract we made, I remember that I meant to step down after a while, and everything will be fine, don't worry. It's interesting to note that this monument is no longer in Persia proper, around Persepolis like a lot of previous kings, but they've been moved up to Media in a place called Takebostan, which is also along a route of the Silk Road, so, travelers moving by will look at this and say, oh wait, that's the king, that's the guy on the money. Good to know. He has symbology there. We're not sure why the change in location. It's possible that the center of royal power had shifted away from Persia, maybe due to dynastic or religious reasons, and that someone else was more in control in Persia. It could also be the desire to establish something new and distance himself from previous kings, since the art style is changing from showing a victorious king in the style of Shapur I to more of a portrait style where the king is standing, facing the camera, shaking hands with somebody. But, unfortunately, we don't really know what the reason for this is. But again, as for last time, there's a development of new art forms going on, and we conserve a beautiful silver dish where we see Ardashir on horseback hunting some lions with a bow and arrow. So these more portable tools of propaganda would probably have been gifted to important courtiers and vassal kings as both precious rewards and a reminder of the king's power and strength.
Yeah, we talked about this.
Yeah.
On our last
the
episode.
style is continuing overall. But wait, we haven't heard of Armenia for a while, so what's happened?
I wasn't missing them.
Well, it looks like there's problems in the Roman side of Armenia, not our side, so that's nice. Because apparently an Armenian general called Manuel, or Manuel,
okay,
however you want to pronounce that, has deposed the pro-Roman king of Armenia and asked Ardashir for help with this rebellion, saying, hey, would you like all of Armenia? That would be cool. I'll hand you all of Armenia if you help me rebel. Ardashir hears this and says, well, according to the peace treaty, Armenia is officially neutral, so I'm not technically breaking the peace treaty with Rome, so they can't say anything. They can't control their rebels.
It's a loophole.
It's their own fault.
It's so funny to me that, we hail Rome as, the birthplace of our current lawmaking education. So, their system of laws was so well thought out that we still use it as a basis for our current rights, right? And our current, like, what is this called? Yeah, it's just
Legal
law
system.
in English, right? Like,
Yeah.
just the law system. But then Romans are just known for finding loopholes in their own contracts and putting loopholes into other people's contracts and just being like, haha, doesn't technically count. Which, like, it's so funny to me.
If laws did not have loopholes, we would not need lawyers.
Yeah.
But we need a way to interpret things and say, well, if you read this paragraph with a sarcastic tone, then you can see that
Then
it's
it's
actually fine. Yeah. Good
This
stuff.
was never meant to be that you couldn't do this. It was just a dare.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a coward, you're not going to do that, but we're not cowards, are we?
Yeah.
So Ardashir looks at the legalese and says, doesn't say anywhere that we can't help rebellions in Rome and Armenia, so screw it, let's go. So he provided help to this Manuel, and they expelled all the Roman forces, making Armenia once more fully under Sassanid control.
Yeah.
Huzzah, we made it. Can you guess the problems, Ariel?
Can you repeat the situation?
So, there's been a rebellion in Rome and Armenia.
Yes.
The rebel asked for help.
Yeah.
We gave help to the rebel.
Yes.
And now
Up to there,
we
I
have one Armenia that is ours.
Yeah.
Can you guess what an issue might be with this?
That
Or
the
does it seem
Romans
fine and
don't
dandy?
like that?
The Romans don't like it, but they can't do anything like written on the paper. They can't.
Right, because it was a rebellion technically and not us, like, conquering.
Yeah, they just rebelled and spontaneously decided to join. So, why not?
So, what is the issue? That, like, we are not governing Armenia? Because then the person, like, either the king of Armenia at the time, so the rebel who promised us
Yes.
all of Armenia goes back on his word, or that there's a bunch of Roman citizens who don't want Armenia to be part of the Persian Empire.
Well,
Or-
the first one is correct because Manuel the Rebel decides that
Actually,
after
no.
he's been like a few months under Sassanid Armenia, he says, no, I actually preferred being independent, so he rebels.
Oh my god.
There
I see. So we should have just like
the man doesn't know.
yeah, we should have like realized that this was his nature, you know.
Yeah. He just rebels for fun. He doesn't care who he's
Yeah,
rebelling
because at this
against.
point it doesn't make sense. Why would you rebel like one small city state against an empire? Like who
Yeah,
do you
but,
think is gonna win?
He won last time against the Romans.
Yeah, but because we had like half of it.
Yeah, but maybe he'll ask the Romans for help this time and say, hey, Romans.
And
do you wanna
then
get
he's
that
gonna
back?
be, you know, in the Roman Empire. Like this
Maybe
doesn't
he
lead
can
him to
ping-pong
independence.
back again forever. Maybe he is not a smart man.
Then the citizens of
considered
Armenia
that?
should just burn him. You know.
That's fair enough. But yeah, the fact is, this leads to a bit of a simmering civil war in Armenia
Of course,
because
yeah.
some Armenian nobles who don't want to be so dependent on the king, well, they join Manuel and then they fight, but then they get caught, and so they're like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry, I was deceived." And then
I never
then
meant
a new
to,
noble makes an enemy of the king and is like, "Oh no, but I always meant to rebel." And it's a whole thing. Armenia is bubbling, so it's like technically ours, but it's we technically have all of Armenia now, but it's a bit more bubbly on the way. But back in the empire, how are things going? Ardashir's rule seems to have been quite successful overall. He is described as wise, generous, and faithful, which granted him the title of Ardashir the Beneficent, which is a nice title to have. It's always good. And in his coins, he tries to portray himself as a new Ardashir I, adopting a similar crown to that of his ancestor and keeping up the fire altar motif that was present in the coins of earlier Sassanids. And the presence of the altar also might indicate the desire to merge political and religious power in the person of the king rather than dividing it like what Shapur had done. So maybe he's trying to regain some royal power over religion, which shows a political program, but is also an ambition to return to the good old days when the Huns in the east weren't attacking us, and the empire was being born, and everything was great, and everything was fine. The only problem with his rule is that he was continuing Shapur's policy of being a strong ruler, trying to keep a leash on the nobles and ensure that power remained centralized. But the nobles don't like that. The nobles, they're saying, yeah, we respected Shapur because he was Shapur.
Because we were scared.
The king. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing, is like he managed to tame the nobles because he was ruthless. And if you're not going to keep that up, then they're going to be like, oh, well, Shapur's gone now. We can go back to do what we were doing 100 years ago. Because I assume... Here's the thing, it's been like a generation at least of them.
I mean, it's been 70 years, so you have a couple of generations have passed.
So, were these values just like passed down onto this new generation of nobles by their families? Or, I mean, you know, I feel like it takes more than a couple of generations to like break this pattern of rich people want to get richer. Even like, I don't know if it's something you can break actually. So it makes sense. Even if it's new people who are rich now, the urge is still gonna be there to rebel against the king and to just amass more power.
It might just be the general fact that the nobles are greedy and self-centered because they are.
Yeah. Like, as I was making this argument, I was like, this is not how it works. This is not something that has to be taught down.
Yeah, you don't have to teach rich, pompous holes that they can become richer and more pompous.
Yeah.
They just do it because they can.
Yeah.
Also, it might just be a general factor of, you know, sort of like the Queen Elizabeth, King Charles effect, where if it's been 70 years with the same monarch, you just respect them for the fact that they've been there so long and it's all everybody's ever known. But when you get this new guy, you don't really care much about him. It's just like, yeah, I mean, I guess I respected your father/uncle, but now that it's you, it's like, what are you gonna do? Brutally slaughter me and all my family like Shapur did? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But yeah, we saw that there was an issue. So it seems that Ardashir was trying to make sure the nobles knew who was boss. We're told that he executed a number of powerful nobles to reduce their power after he had long hated them as a prince. So, as a prince, he had made enemies. He killed those nobles. But it's also suggested that this might be a reaction to an attempted coup by the nobles who wanted to put Shapur III on the throne before it was time, so that they could maneuver him as a regency council instead of having to mediate through Ardashir. So that's possibly the case, who knows. Another unfortunate part that's not going too well is that the Kidderite Huns in the east are still causing a lot of trouble, because Shapur II didn't really manage to live long enough to solve that, and so these nomads keep hammering the border, raiding those areas, and going back into the steppe, so it's something that's a bit difficult to deal with, and it looks like Ardashir is stopping the problem from getting worse, but he isn't fixing it. So it's going on, but not great.
Yeah.
But then, in 383, we get the nobles doing what nobles do.
Oh, of course.
Because the nobles go up to the palace, and they accuse Ardashir of planning on never giving up power to Shapur III, but planning on keeping it for himself forever.
Well, but then wouldn't he have killed Shapur III? Because it's a kid, right? So, like...
He's a teen at this point.
Like, I feel like this is when it's going to be the easiest... Like, the longer he waits, the harder it's going to get to kill him. So if this was his plan, you know...
Yeah, I mean, this is what the nobles are going.
Of course, of course.
If you believe the nobles,
which we don't.
Ardashir looked sketchy and he was probably going to keep power, or if you believe Ardashir and say, no, he was just waiting until Shapur was old enough and properly trained, and then he was going to step down. Or, you know, maybe Ardashir did get corrupted by power and thought, well, you know, I could just say that Shapur is too immature and he needs more time. And oh, look at him, he's too young. And oh, look, maybe go on a hunt. And oh, no, he got stabbed in the neck 3 times. It happens.
But does it happen?
No, it's not.
Yeah, so...
It could be, but, you know, we don't get sources on that. But the nobles just tell us that it's time for him to step down in favor of Shapur. And it's also possible that these were some of the same conspirators from before that decide to make their move before Ardashir found more conspirators and decided to round them all up and kill them. So in 383, Ardashir was deposed by the nobles in favor of his cousin / younger brother / nephew, Shapur III. And it looks like he went quietly. He didn't really start a massive civil war. It was just fine. And we don't know much else about Ardashir's life after this, because it's possible that he was executed because having ex-kings lying around is always an attractor to rebels, so it's best to get rid of him so he doesn't cause any mayhem. Or if Ardashir especially was a brother of Shapur II, or at least in the same rough generation as him, as his nephew might have been, since, Shapur was born very late, it is possible that Ardashir was just a really old man anyway, and he just died of natural causes shortly after, and it just happened to clean up loose ends for Shapur III, and everything was fine afterwards.
Yeah.
According to Al-Tabari, Ardashir submitted to Shapur III and was treated well before he just passed away of old age. So, you can choose your favorite option. How merciful do you think the nobles were after starting their coup? We do get signs of nobles being merciful in the future and just imprisoning people rather than executing them. Who knows?
Good that you mentioned that, because so far they've just been
I mean, yeah, that's the point of a nobility. The nobility is there to just look fancy and take
not to say
money.
that the kings haven't been, they haven't been gracious always, but...
No, but the kings have a role in society.
Yeah. Unlike the nobles.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I don't like nobility nowadays, and I don't like it in the past. That's just...
No.
Yeah,
no. It wasn't useful then, it is not useful now.
Yeah.
You can make an argument for monarchy, not for aristocracy.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you say that they are merciful in the future, maybe this is where it starts.
It's a little old man who was just trying his best to just govern the empire.
Was he?
Well, we don't really know. It depends on what he was.
Right.
But if he was a nephew or brother of Shapur II, then he was in his 70s.
Right.
If he was a son, then he was probably in his 50s.
Yeah. I could see the nobles getting rid of him, especially if he was loyal and if he was willing to keep Shapur's ideas, keep expanding on those ideas, which is what the nobles.
I mean, that's what he claimed, and he seems to have been against the nobles. And he
wanted the bloodline to continue.
Mm-hmm.
So both could make sense. Because in the end, the nobles are doing this for their own gain, so it doesn't matter if he planned to keep the throne for himself or he planned to pass it on to Shapur's son.
Yeah.
Because that's irrelevant. That's just an
we don't
argument
really know.
Use, right?
We only have the nobles' word for it, and that's not worth anything.
But if the nobles were getting restless and saw their opportunity now that Shapur was gone, it would make sense that they made a move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they finally saw their chance and said, after 70 years of having to behave, it's time to actually cause some mayhem.
Yeah.
But, maybe Shapur III was trying to protect his predecessor and said, oh, no, yes, I'll be your king, but now that I'm king, make sure that he just gets a comfortable house arrest. Because he did want my best interests at heart. Who knows? Well, that is the life of Ardashir II. Not as long and glorious as Shapur II by a long margin, but he tried. That's all we can really ask of people. That you try. So, are you ready to rate him, Serial?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
I'm not as disappointed as I could have been. I'm just a bit sad.
Yeah, could have been worse, could have been better.
But I think, overall, regardless of his intentions of keeping the throne for himself or not, you did fine.
So our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? Either dying of old age shortly after being deposed, or potentially being executed by his successor Shapur III on the nobles' orders. What do you rate that? Because we have the ambiguity, which I guess lowers it a little bit, but it is interesting, I guess, if he were executed.
At least you have some drama around it, right? It's not just he faded into history. I don't know, maybe a couple of points.
Yeah, I was thinking 2 exactly, because it's...
I think just 1.
I think it's that if we knew for certain he was executed, that would be like a 5-ish. But I'm going to like have it because we don't really know.
Fair.
So that's my reasoning. But if you want to stick with the 1, that's your
No,
prerogative.
I'll go with a 2. That is fair. It is somewhat interesting. A 1 seems like too little.
Okay, so with a 2 and a 2, he gets a 2 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting?
Do we have much?
We have something. From his time as a prince, we have at least a monument of him saying that he helped defeat and kill Julian. So he was a vassal king in the empire beforehand, and he lent his armies to the war against Julian, and that war was eventually successful and victorious. So he must have done something there, which was pretty good. And as a king, we have this small rebellion in Armenia where he helped kick out the Romans a little bit and then had to fight this small civil war on and off, which is something. And then in the Far East, he has to hold back the Kidderite Huns to make sure that they're not spreading through the empire, but that they're staying where they have to. So he isn't defeating them or anything, or maybe he is defeating them in minor ways, but he does something. It's nothing too flashy. My reasoning here was maybe a couple points for Julian, 1 for Armenia, and 1 for the East. So a total of 4, which is like, he did something, but it was nothing to write home about.
Yeah, I mean, things didn't get much worse. What happened with the Armenia situation in the end?
It's still there, different nobles are... Yeah, it's like Armenia is now fully Iranian.
Right.
But there are still nobles who are saying, oh no, we want to be independent. And
but it's not like wars necessarily.
No, and the empire isn't involved. It's mostly now an internal Armenian thing.
Yeah, no, I think...
we're helping out occasionally, but not too much.
Overall, I think it's fine. I think he did well.
Mm-hmm.
So why are you giving him less than a 5?
I mean, for battle hardness, because there wasn't much that he...
Well, he didn't, battle... Wait, are we counting, the rest of his life?
I'm counting him as a prince. I'm giving him 2 points for the defeating Julian. But, for the rest, it's he did go to war, but it's not I wouldn't call him a warrior king or anything.
No, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, then we can keep some of these points for Ehrenstein.
Yeah, I feel like I gave a 5 for Narse, for example.
Yeah,
where he fought a lot during his life, and yes, he lost, but he was...
Yeah, it should be... I see what you're saying. Yeah, I think...
So I think he still deserves a 4. It's fair enough, but...
I agree.
Okay, so with a 4 and a 4, we get an 8 out of 20 for battle hardness. Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations? Well, here there's a couple things, actually. So the first one is that he arrested nobles and executed them, possibly because he found out part of a coup plan against him. We're not sure about it, but that is a possibility. And then secondly, it depends how much you want to believe the accusations of the nobles that he was trying to maneuver his way into being king until he died and then leaving Shapur afterwards. Because, maybe Ardashir thought, well, I'm an old man. What's 5 more years? Shapur can wait. So, yeah, it depends how much you would believe that sort of thing happening.
Yeah. I've been very biased towards him not actually trying to take the throne. But even if he did, I don't know if he took many measures to, weave the threads in his favor.
He clearly didn't take enough because he failed.
So I don't know.
But maybe he tried.
Throughout the episode, I didn't feel like we talked about anything particularly schemy.
No. Oh, another schemy thing you could say is loophole with the Romans saying, oh no, it's just a rebellion. I'm just doing that. It's fine. Yeah.
I like when we play the Romans at their own game, Beat the Romans at their own game. This is, my trademark at this point in the podcast should be mentioning sayings or internet memes and quoting them wrong. And hoping that people know what I'm referring to.
We have a clever and lovely audience. I'm sure they'll know.
But yeah, that deserves a point. But otherwise...
I'm thinking 1 point for the legalese. 1 point for maybe discovering this conspiracy and executing some nobles. That's worth something, I guess. And then I don't know if to give 1 point for the accusation of... No, you know what? I'm going to give 1 point combined for the executing the nobles and the maybe trying to take over Shapur III, because I combined those into one conspiracy. So I'm going to say 2 points for skeeviness on my side. How about you?
Yeah. It's just like 1 or 2 points. I'm not buying it. I want 1 point for the Roman thing.
Like, yeah.
And executing the nobles I don't know if it was like if he discovered the conspiracy or if it was just like...
Just execute nobles for fun.
because
because you can.
Yeah, no, maybe another point for that. Yeah, then that 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with a 2 and a 2, we get a 4 out of 20 for skeeviness. Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man? Not too much, honestly.
But...
The slightly shocking things we have are that he is a caretaker king. We don't see those often. So that's unusual. Maybe a bit notable. We have that he does execute some powerful nobles for whatever reason. That does count there. And then otherwise, he is trying to harken back to an older time, but that's not especially shocking overall. I feel like there's very little of shocking in him. It's mostly business as usual. Do your job, do it reasonably well. The end. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to give him a point for some few executions, but nothing much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about you?
I wasn't that shocked. If anything, that, like, he came into power and that, you know, the mystery surrounding whether he was loyal to Shapur II or not. Or, like, was going to respect his wishes. But we also don't know, so, like,
Yeah, he was accused of not wanting to respect them, but...
Yeah, but it's the nobles who are also not gonna respect them. Yeah, I don't find really reasons to give him any points.
So you're going for a 0?
Yeah, not the most shocking king we've had.
That's fair enough. So with a 1 and a 0, he gets a 1 out of 20 for shock factor. Our next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular? Well, he claims to want to continue the policies of Shapur II. That's good. Those were good policies. Apart from the persecutions, but, you know, you win some, you lose some. In his general dealings with the Empire, he does gain a tiny extra bit of Armenia. That's nice. That's always fun. He keeps the nomads at bay, though he doesn't solve the problem. So he doesn't manage to get a permanent peace with them, but at least they're not invading more than usual. So I guess it's fine. He tries to squish the nobles down, but ultimately fails at that, and the succession is a bit messy after him because, yes, it was what was going to happen anyway, but he's being forced into it as opposed to voluntarily giving up power. And otherwise, he's known as the Beneficent. He is known as being wise, generous, and faithful. That's good. So I think broadly a reasonably good job. I don't know how much to... See, I think my basic idea would be a 5 because the Empire just continues and it's, you know, it's not going worse, not going much better, but fine. But then there's the fact that he was overthrown, which is always messy. I'm wondering if that deserves just like him to be bumped down to a 4, or the fact that he was continuing good policies means that he still gets a 5, and that's fine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think a 5 is fair since things seem to overall be on the same place, but of course the nobles are gaining control now. So I think a 4 makes sense. Like, I would probably go for a 4. Although I would also be fine with a 5.
You know what? To push you down to a 4, I'm going to say that he is still continuing the persecutions.
That's true.
So that's not great. So that consolidates my 4.
Yep, same.
So, yeah, with a 4 and a 4, he gets an 8 out of 20 for Aaron Shine. Which, you know, could be worse. Could be a ballroom. Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like? And let me send you his crown, which, as mentioned, is more of an older style of crown, but...
way less cooler crown, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's an older style.
I mean, like, it's fine, but, you know. But he's also not like he was the king while the heir was growing up, so I guess
Yeah,
he can
was
have
meant
a
to just,
toned down crown.
Stay. Yeah. Okay, so Sarah has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all.
Not my best. Just so you know, I am very tired these days. So it's gonna show.
Okay. Oh. He is very cute though. So essentially what we have is a small sausage of a man.
Yep, sorry.
He has robes and he's sort of like holding one arm with the other, looking a bit uncomfortable. He has a nice big long beard and curly hair. And on top he has, an older style crown, sort of like what Ardashir I had. It was sort of has like a big globe on top with the diadem ends floating in the wind. And to his right is an arm with bangles and rings, pointing towards him, waving in the air, saying, "Treason, treason," as the nobles believe that this poor, innocent man is actually a terrible criminal. And they will stop at nothing to make sure
Listen,
that's
the version I'm going for. I'm not saying he didn't plan on committing treason.
If we ever have to choose a side between the nobles and the king, you know which side we fall on.
And, that is if we're forced to choose the side.
Yes.
Because I am not fond of either.
Yeah, if the two of them are fighting, then we know who wins. If it's the king versus, like, the good of the people, well then, okay, that's a different matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Sarah, for the lovely drawing. As usual, if you are a patron, you can find this on the Discord. Otherwise, you can go on the episode notes down below or on our website in Sarah's portrait gallery. Now, Sarah, let me show you what he looked like in this relief where it's him, his father, and Mithra.
Oh.
Standing over the corpse of Julian. I mean, his father,
That's nice.
Shapur II.
Well, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
We said he was
to the
like
right is Shapur,
nephew
middle is
or something.
Ardashir, to the left is Mithra. And on the ground there, you can see a Julian.
Oh, this is a great relief. I love this. I love how they're stylized. I love that they have the diadems just flowing behind them and the cool crowns. And this is excellent. I'm gonna give it an 8. Just out the bat.
Fair enough, yeah.
I really like this relief. It's a good relief. It's the 3 figures standing like in a kind of dynamic pose. Like they are stationary, right? But
yeah,
it's not like other reliefs we've seen in the past where like they are fully on profile or they're like, oh, their bodies are kind of pointing forward and their faces are like 3/4, which is like much more complex to depict. And Ardashir's arm is reaching over his chest to grab the diadem that Shapur is handing him. And yeah, it's cool. You can see the detail in the clothing and also the
I especially like the sun rays
and,
around Mithra.
Yeah,
I think those
it's so
look
good.
nice. That's a good sign.
Yeah, it's very pretty.
Yeah,
So,
I think I agree with your 8. It's not like the best relief I've ever seen, but I'm happy to see it. It's good. Good stuff. Always nice to see a Roman emperor trampled. That's fun.
Yes. We love that here.
Okay, so with an 8 and an 8, he gets a 4 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. How long do you think he reigned?
Probably not long, because probably the nobles got to work immediately. So I'm going to say 3 years?
Just a little bit above. He reigned for 4 years.
Okay, I was undecisive between 4 or 3, but I was like, I'm going to go for a lower, because I always tend to estimate more than...
Yeah, I guess even the nobles needed to actually make an argument that Shapur III was old enough to get the throne in his own right. So he reigned from 379 to 383. So take 4 years divided by 10. That gives us 0.4 out of 5 for lengthiness, which is nothing compared to his father's, to Shapur II's 70s. But
yeah. I see that you have already put him in your mind as his son.
Yeah,
I just don't think it makes sense.
No. I also agree it's the nephew. It's just that it's like the direct line of succession, which is screwing with my thought pattern.
I see.
But yeah, so that brings us to the final score, which is a grand total of 27.4 out of 100, which places him comfortably in the high 20s club, above Artaxerxes I and below Bahram I. So in the group where it's like, it's keeping up. It's keeping up. I guess. Could be worse.
I guess, yeah, it could be worse.
Yeah. You need to make the noise to get the... But that brings us to the final question, which is to say, is he nephewy enough? Is he possibly loyal enough? Is he overthrown enough to be a Shahanshah? Or is he just a Shahannah?
Nah. I don't
know. Yeah. I feel like I'm sympathetic towards him because I feel like he was wronged by the nobles, but also, he's not the person you're going to stop somebody into, if somebody asks, what podcast episode should I start with? I'm not going to say,
this one.
Definitely Ardashir II. You're going to be in for a wild ride. To be like, it's fine. It's good to know that this happened, but it's not up there. So yeah, sorry Ardashir, you are a Shahannah. You can go off into the desert and meet Adurnarse and tell him that things are way better now, but you didn't really do too much for it, so we tried.
Yeah.
And that's it for today. Thank you all for listening. We hope you enjoyed Ardashir II's episode, and we hope you'll join us next time for Shapur III. Will this guy who is actually son of Shapur II do a good job? Will he echo his father? Will he be more meh? Will he destroy everything? Join us to find out. In the meantime, if you'd like to support us, there are several ways to do that. You can join us on Patreon, like our new patron, NXC. And on Patreon, we have just finished voting for the new series. I don't know what it is yet, because I live in the past right now. We'll see what happens in the future when this episode is released.
Yeah. Hope people will be voting.
Yeah, some past episodes which are cool that you could follow up on are Mithridates the Great, the Poison King, Alcibiades, Ashoka Maurya, Mani, to quote one per series.
That gives a lot of context for this particular arc too.
Yeah, exactly. So there are many different things that are going on that you could gain more insight in, and hey, you help us buy books and stuff, which are expensive, and it's nice to be able to actually not lose money. So
yeah, like the money goes directly to help Umberto's research. Like
yes, we are not spending it on yachts.
Yeah, we're not getting rich with this, and also it's not even going to like, I don't know, a bar of chocolate or something.
No,
like this just helps the podcast keep getting made. So
we appreciate it. It would be nice.
But hey, if you can't donate monetarily, which is fine, we're all broke here, you can just leave a review on your podcast app of choice, on Spotify or on Podbean or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that really helps, because then other people can read the reviews. And even if you don't put anything and just give us a 5-star review, that also helps people think, oh, hey, this podcast has good reviews, maybe I'll check it out. Or just tell your friends about it. Honestly, we get a lot of new listeners thanks to word of mouth, and that's really lovely. So we know who you are. No, we don't, but
we know who some of you are.
Yes.
Friends have told us about you.
So yeah, just say a couple of words. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. We're happy to read the reviews.
Yes. And yeah, so I think without any further ado, we hope you have a nice week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.